Around 65,000 years ago, the first modern humans arrive on the northern edge of Sahul, the great landmass that joins what is now Australia, New Guinea and Tasmania. The sea levels are far lower than they will be in later millennia, locked in the ice of Pleistocene glaciers. The crossing from Wallacea to Sahul is still immense, involving open-sea voyages across visible and invisible channels, but the distances are shorter than today. Archaeological evidence from Majid Bebe, a rock shelter in Arnhem Land, anchors this presence with dates that stretch back beyond 60,000 years, perhaps close to 65,000. The shelter preserves layers of stone tools, pigments and hearths, marking one of the oldest known human occupations outside Africa. The fact itself is remarkable. Here is evidence that populations not only reached Sahul, but were thriving within its landscapes. The coastline they encounter is different from today's map. Northern Australia reaches further outward with wide plains where now the Arafura Sea lies. Mangroves, estuaries and monsoon-fed rivers mark the shoreline, creating a zone of abundance. These coasts are alive with shellfish, fish and freshwater animals, offering resources to sustain growing groups. The arrival is not a single event, but part of a gradual expansion. Multiple crossings over generations are likely bringing people in sufficient numbers to form a viable population. Genetic research supports this, showing that the settlement of Sahul required not just isolated voyages, but sustained migration. Perhaps hundreds of individuals making landfall across scattered points of the northern coast. Among the earliest traces are not only flakes and cores of stone, but ground-edge hatchets among the oldest yet known. At Majid Bebe, fragments of these tools appear in the deepest layers, suggesting that new technologies develop or are carried here with the first settlers. Edge-ground tools are absent in Africa at this time, pointing to local innovation within Sahul. Alongside them, grinding stones show that seeds and roots are processed, widening the range of foods people can use. These tools, combined with hearths and pigment-stained rock, indicate a community already established, not merely passing through. A lesser-known detail comes from the transport of stone raw materials over long distances. Quartzite and chert found in some shelters are not from immediate surroundings, implying that people travel across wide territories or maintain exchange routes from the very beginning of settlement. This movement is important. It signals that mobility across landscapes and perhaps connections between groups are features of Sahul life from the start. Archaeological studies of quarries and stone sources in Kakadu and nearby regions show how such materials spread, hinting at the earliest threads of regional networks. Still, mysteries remain. The exact route of arrival is not fully known. Some models suggest landfall in northwest Australia, perhaps near Kimberley, while others argue for entry through Arnhem Land or even further east. Computer simulations of wind current and visibility point to possible landing sites, but no single path is certain. Another unresolved question is intention. Were these early crossings carefully planned with watercraft and knowledge of currents, or did storms and drift play a role? The evidence leans toward intentionality, given the numbers needed to establish populations. But the question is open. At the planetary scale, this arrival is part of a broader transformation. By this period, humans have already spread widely across Asia, with traces in Siberia, China, and Southeast Asia. As glaciers draw the seas downward by more than 70 meters, new lands open, while coastal corridors extend across thousands of kilometers. Sahul stands as one of the largest landmasses colonized early by modern humans, a region requiring navigation of sea gaps wider than any previous migration out of Africa. In terms of scale, the journey into Sahul covers distances comparable to continental crossings, greater than the span from Paris to Seoul. It marks humanity's entry into one of the most ecologically distinct continents, a place isolated by water, its life forms unlike any elsewhere. The northern shore offers both opportunity and challenge. Tropical monsoons bring heavy rains, swelling rivers and wetlands. Dry seasons reduce them to networks of waterholes, demanding adaptation to cycles of abundance and scarcity. The archaeological record preserves traces of both. Charcoal layers suggest frequent burning of vegetation, whether accidental or deliberate. Burnt monsoon vine thickets in some deposits point to the early use of fire as a tool in shaping the land. This practice, sometimes described as fire stick farming, changes ecosystems by promoting grasses and attracting animals. Even in these first centuries, humans are already interacting with the environment in ways that leave visible marks. The coast is not just a place of settlement, but also a starting point for dispersal. From here, groups begin to move inland following rivers, ridgelines, and resource zones. The rhythm of settlement expands outward, with some bands staying near estuaries and others testing the limits of open plains. The shoreline itself is not stable. As the world climate shifts, the coastline will advance or retreat sometimes by tens of kilometers. What begins as a broad continental shelf of mangroves and swamps will in time be drowned beneath rising seas. Yet in this early moment, it is a living frontier. Within shelters like Majed Baby, fragments of ochre bear scratches and grinding marks. Some pieces are ground into powder, possibly for body decoration or symbolic use. While the exact meaning cannot be reconstructed, the presence of pigment suggests symbolic behavior is present from the earliest settlement. This aligns with evidence elsewhere in the world, but gains new depth in Sahul, where ochre will become a central material for art and ritual for tens of thousands of years. The continuity of this practice across such a vast span underscores its importance to human life here. The survival of these traces in rock shelters is itself remarkable. Layers of sediment accumulate with ash flakes and plant remains, preserving a continuous sequence. Optical luminescence dating of grains of quartz and feldspar provides the timeline showing when sunlight last touched the particles before burial. These methods applied carefully reveal a chronology that reaches back further than once expected. The dates cluster around 65,000 years, giving confidence that these are not recent intrusions but genuine markers of deep antiquity. The shores of Sahul are thus both a boundary and a beginning. For the first people who step onto these lands, it is the start of an immense dispersal that will within a few millennia reach across deserts, forests and mountains all the way to Tasmania. For the continent itself, it is the arrival of a new species, one that will interact with its unique ecosystems in ways that no other animal has done. What remains uncertain is not whether people came, but how they spread, what routes they took, and how quickly they adapted. The fact that they endure here for tens of thousands of years testifies to a profound capacity for resilience. In this opening chapter of the Sahul story, the evidence speaks through stone, pigment and hearth. A shoreline once wide and fertile now lies submerged, its camps long vanished beneath the sea. Yet inland in shelters still above ground, the traces remain: tools chipped from stone ochre, rubbed to dust, seeds ground on slabs, charcoal blackened in layers. They are the quiet record of humanity's first foothold on a continent that will shape their history for millennia to come. From the first footholds along northern Sahul, groups of people begin to move inland, tracing the lifelines of rivers that cut through the tropics. These rivers, swollen in the wet season and reduced to channels of refuge in the dry, become natural corridors of travel and settlement. The monsoon cycles dominate this part of the continent, dictating when floodplains brim with fish and waterfowl, and when only deep billabongs and shaded waterholes endure. Archaeological traces in Arnhem Land and Kakadu suggest that people quickly learn the rhythm of these waters, returning to the same shelters as the seasons turn, using the land in patterns that endure for millennia. These waterways, with their floodplains, lagoons and sand ridges, form some of the richest environments in early Sahul. Fact anchors this story: hearth stone tools and plant remains recovered from rock shelters like Nawala Gabon and Carpenter's Gap show repeated use through tens of thousands of years, with some sites still in use in more recent times. The shelters themselves are set in sandstone escarpments and limestone ranges that hold water and offer shelter. The archaeological record shows continuity but also change. Tool types shift subtly through time. Pigments continue to be used, and the remains of plants and animals suggest careful tracking of available foods. Here, rivers are not just sources of sustenance, but axes of memory, as communities move along them, leaving behind deposits of ash stone and pigment that form layered histories. A lesser-known detail lies in the seeds and plant residues recovered from grinding stones in these tropical zones. Evidence shows that people were processing not only tubers and roots, but also seeds of grasses that require preparation to be edible. This early plant use indicates an intimate knowledge of the seasonal abundance around river edges. It also suggests that food strategies include not only hunting, but complex gathering preparation and storage. Archaeobotanical studies of microfossils caught in stone surfaces highlight this subtle but crucial part of subsistence. These details expand our view of how humans sustain themselves beyond the visible traces of hearths and tools. The great mystery is how quickly people adapt to the demands of tropical river systems. The environments of Sahel are unlike Africa or Asia. Here, saltwater crocodiles, marsupials, and unique birdlife replace the familiar species of other continents. Floodplain ecologies can shift dramatically in a single year, with floods washing away camps and fires reshaping the land. Yet, within centuries of arrival, there is evidence of deep familiarity with these cycles. How long this learning takes, and whether some knowledge is brought with them from earlier tropical homelands in island Southeast Asia, remains uncertain. Did the rhythms of monsoon and dry seasons echo environments already known, or did people reinvent their ways of life here entirely? Archaeology alone cannot yet give a full answer. Planetary context is important. This is the last glacial period, a time when ice sheets cover much of the northern hemisphere. Yet in the tropics of Sahel, monsoons remain strong, fed by global circulations of heat and water vapor. As glaciers grow, sea levels stay low, exposing vast continental shelves, including the now submerged plains north of Australia. These exposed lands expand the reach of rivers outward, creating estuaries and deltas that no longer exist. To imagine this time is to see the continent stretched wider with tropical rivers flowing far out across what is today seafloor. The scale of these landscapes is immense floodplains, the size of modern countries, shifting with the climate but always central to human settlement. Archaeological remains highlight how these rivers are not just boundaries but pathways. Obsidian from New Guinea, ochre from distant sources, and stone raw materials transported dozens of kilometers suggest that river systems serve as conduits of movement and exchange. Seasonal gatherings may take place at key nodes along waterways where resources concentrate and groups can meet. Over time, traditions of rock art, pigment use, and tool-making radiate outward along these corridors. The rivers, in effect, knit together disparate parts of the northern continent. Charcoal in floodplain deposits shows another layer of human influence: deliberate burning. By firing patches of grassland, early inhabitants can attract grazing animals such as wallabies, create open spaces, and ease movement. Fire also helps manage plant foods, stimulating regrowth of edible species. Across Kakadu, fire marks appear in sediment cores dating back tens of millennia. These traces imply that even in the earliest phases of settlement, people are already shaping ecosystems, extending beyond passive adaptation into active land management. The shelters themselves hold echoes of symbolic life. Pigments of red, yellow, and black ground from ochre, hematite, and charcoal are found in habitation layers. While the oldest surviving paintings may not date to this earliest period, the presence of pigment indicates that artistic or symbolic practices are embedded from the beginning. The act of grinding ochre, preparing it for use on bodies, objects, or walls, connects the practical with the symbolic. In these tropical shelters, stone slabs stained red endure as quiet testimony to lives lived around firelight in cycles of flood and retreat. One of the most enduring sites, Nawala Gaban Mang, reveals stone slabs repositioned by human hands tens of thousands of years ago, reshaping the shelter space. This is not simply occupation, but architectural modification, one of the oldest known instances of humans altering a built environment in Sahul. Such details add nuance. People are not only moving through landscapes but actively engineering their spaces of living. The rivers and shelters are not passive backdrops, they are co-created settings of human life. The unresolved mysteries extend beyond routes and adaptations. One puzzle concerns population size. Genetic models suggest that thousands of people may already inhabit Sahul within a few millennia of arrival. How such numbers grow and whether multiple migrations contribute to them remains uncertain. Did all groups descend from a single successful landing, or did different waves enter over centuries? The answer is hidden in both genetics and archaeology, still debated by researchers. At planetary scale again, the spread through the tropics of Sahul echoes other global expansions of Homo sapiens. In the same era, humans move into Europe and Siberia, adapting to cold steppes and boreal forests. In Sahul, the challenge is opposite humid tropics and seasonal extremes of rain. Yet in both regions, rivers play key roles as corridors of survival. It is a recurring human pattern wherever they move, rivers anchor life, guiding migration, sustenance, and memory. The scale of travel is immense. From Arnhem Land to the Kimberley across the top end and into Cape York, rivers form networks hundreds of kilometers long. A journey along the Daly or Victoria rivers could stretch as far as a march from Berlin to Warsaw. Yet in this world, such distances are not barriers but lifelines. Campsites, quarries and shelters dot these routes, marking stages in vast seasonal rounds. For the first Australians, such travels are not extraordinary but necessary, woven into the cycles of their existence. Over tens of thousands of years, the rivers change, shifting course, silting up, cutting new channels. Some floodplains dry as climates cool, while others expand as monsoons intensify. Through all of this, humans remain present, their traces layered in sediments. The rivers serve as constants in a world of change, both fragile and enduring. They are the threads by which the early settlers spread further southward and inland, eventually reaching deserts and coasts far beyond. In this chapter of Sahul's story, the rivers of the north are more than geographic features. They are dynamic living systems, pathways of movement, sources of food, and canvases for memory. Archaeological fragments, grinding stones stained with seed residues, hearths layered in ash pigments rubbed on stone bare, witness to how people inhabit these cycles. Yet questions remain unanswered: how swiftly they learned, how many came, and how their lives wove into the changing waters. What is certain is that the rivers of the tropics form the arteries through which humanity's first Australian journey flows, carrying life deeper into the continent. As people spread further across northern Sahul, fire becomes one of their most enduring tools. Archaeological and paleo-environmental records show that within a few millennia of arrival, human presence is marked not only by stone and pigment, but by charcoal deposited across wide landscapes. Fire is used to clear undergrowth, to stimulate fresh growth of grasses, to flush animals from cover, and to maintain open travel routes through dense vegetation. It is both practical and transformative, altering ecosystems on scales far larger than a single camp. Sediment cores from wetlands and floodplains in Kakadu and Arnhem Land contain charcoal layers stretching back more than 50,000 years, a signal that fire use is systematic and continuous. These fires are not random. Patterns suggest deliberate burning at particular times of year, aligned with ecological knowledge of plants and animals. A fact central to this story is the identification of sustained fire regimes in northern Australia, dating back to the earliest human occupation. Analysis of pollen and charcoal in lake sediments reveals a shift from closed canopy forests toward more open woodlands soon after human arrival. This change aligns with the practice often described as fire stick farming, in which small controlled burns are lit regularly to maintain mosaics of vegetation. Such mosaics increase biodiversity, favoring certain animals and plants, and create predictable landscapes for hunting and gathering. Fire thus becomes a management tool, allowing humans not only to adapt to their environment, but to shape it actively. A lesser-known detail lies in the evidence of grass seed use in association with fire. Seeds collected from grasses that thrive after burning are found in residues on ancient grinding stones. By burning patches of land, people encourage the regrowth of these grasses, then harvest and process the seeds as food. This cycle intertwines fire with diet, turning landscape management into a food production strategy. Fire is not just a tool for hunting, but a method of cultivating abundance across the land. Yet mysteries remain. Did people introduce entirely new fire regimes, or did they amplify natural cycles of lightning and dry season burning already present in the tropics? Some scholars argue that humans simply increased the frequency and predictability of burns, while others suggest that they fundamentally altered ecosystems in ways that would not otherwise have occurred. The extent to which early fire use contributes to the disappearance of Australia's megafauna also remains debated. While climate change plays a role in these extinctions, the possibility that fire reduces habitats for large animals is not fully resolved. Thus, fire stands at the center of ongoing questions about human impact on the continent's ecological history. At the planetary scale, the human use of fire is a recurrent theme in migration. Across Africa, Europe, and Asia, fire enables warmth, cooking, and protection. In Sahul, the emphasis shifts toward ecosystem management at vast scale. The contrast is striking while ice sheets advance in the north, reshaping tundras and boreal forests. Humans in the southern hemisphere use fire to transform tropical and subtropical landscapes into mosaics of open woodland and grassland. This dual story highlights the adaptability of Homo sapiens. The same species survives Arctic winds and tropical monsoons, using fire differently according to place. The practical effects of fire are visible in the archaeological record. Burnt shells, cracked bones, and charred seeds appear in habitation layers, showing that fire is central to cooking. Blackened hearths mark successive occupations in rock shelters, sometimes layered so densely that they form meters of sediment. In some cases, the repeated burning of shelters themselves alters the color and texture of rock walls, leaving stains and spalls that endure for millennia. Even today, traces of ancient smoke can be identified in microscopic layers, a testimony to fire's constant presence in human life. Charcoal fragments also serve as chronological anchors. Radiocarbon dating of these pieces provides timelines of occupation and activity, making fire not only a tool of survival, but a measure of antiquity. Some of the earliest secure dates for human presence in Sahul come from such fragments recovered from hearths buried deep in rock shelter deposits. Thus, the fires lit by early people continue to illuminate their history thousands of years later. Fire also intersects with symbolic life. Ochre fragments found in shelters are often heat-treated, a process that deepens their color. This suggests intentional use of fire not only for food and land, but for aesthetic or symbolic purposes. Heating ochre makes it easier to grind and intensifies its red hues, perhaps making it more suitable for body decoration or painting. In this way, fire links the practical and the symbolic, shaping both landscapes and cultural expression. One intriguing lesser-discussed observation comes from studies of termite mounds. Some ancient mounds show signs of charring, suggesting that controlled burning was used even in managing insect habitats, whether deliberately or as a byproduct of broader fire regimes. The detail may be small, but it underscores how deeply fire penetrated into the fabric of Sahul ecosystems. The scale of fire use is immense. Satellite studies of charcoal deposits and modern analogues of indigenous burning practices show how patchwork fires create landscapes extending hundreds of kilometers. In ancient times, this would mean that entire regions of northern Sahul were regularly reshaped by human hands. A journey across such lands would reveal alternating patches of new growth, mature woodland and open grass, each stage carefully maintained by burning at different times. For the people moving along rivers and floodplains, fire becomes a compass and a calendar marking when and where resources will appear. Despite this, there are enduring mysteries about continuity. Did early fire regimes remain stable for tens of thousands of years, or were they interrupted by climatic shifts and population changes? During colder and drier phases of the Pleistocene, fire activity appears to wane in some regions, suggesting that both environment and human decisions influence the rhythm of burning. The full story of how fire regimes change over deep time is still being reconstructed through sediment cores and isotopic studies. In terms of adaptation, fire provides resilience. It ensures that food sources remain predictable even when climates fluctuate. By burning, people reduce the risk of catastrophic wildfires during the hottest months, creating safer conditions for themselves. In this sense, fire use can be seen as a long-term ecological strategy, balancing risk and reward in uncertain environments. It is an early example of humans acting as ecosystem engineers, reshaping landscapes at continental scale. As people move further south and inland, fire accompanies them, carried not as a physical object, but as knowledge. The skill of reading winds, timing, burns, and understanding vegetation spreads with communities. This knowledge is invisible in stone, but encoded in practice transmitted through generations. Even though the precise traditions of those first Sahul inhabitants are lost, the persistence of fire in Australian lifeways suggests continuity across tens of millennia. In this chapter, the landscape is alive with both natural and human fire. Lightning still ignites forests in the dry season, but the hand of humanity multiplies its frequency and precision. Rivers, floodplains, and grasslands bear the mark of deliberate burning, producing ecosystems distinct from what might have existed otherwise. Archaeology captures this through charcoal-burnt residues and pollen shifts. Yet the human story of fire is more than evidence. It is a demonstration of how, from the very beginning of life in Sahul, people are not merely adapting to environments, but transforming them. The fires of early Sahul are small, controlled, and repeated, but their cumulative effect is vast. They open pathways for movement, create hunting grounds, secure food, and intensify the colors of ochre that decorate symbolic worlds. Fire is both a constant and a change agent, a rhythm in the seasons and a force that shapes millennia. It stands as one of the clearest markers of human presence on the continent, visible not only in stone and pigment, but in the very composition of forests and plains. As the journey deeper into Sahul continues, fire remains at the heart of survival, adaptation, and transformation. As humans continue to spread across Sahul, stone tools become one of the most enduring traces of their presence. These tools, scattered in shelters, quarries, and open campsites, form a record of adaptation to varied landscapes. In the tropical north, sandstone, quartzite, and chert are struck into sharp flakes and scrapers. Further inland, basalt, silkrete, and other materials are used, each chosen for durability or ease of shaping. The archaeology of these implements tells of journeys, decisions, and traditions carried across the continent. At Majedbebe and Nawalabila in Arnhemland, stone tools appear in some of the deepest layers of occupation, dating back more than 60,000 years. Among them are fragments of ground edge axes, some of the earliest known anywhere in the world. These axes, shaped by grinding rather than flaking alone, represent a technological innovation that emerges in Sahul itself. In Africa and Eurasia, such tools will appear much later. The fact anchors an extraordinary point. The people of Sahul are not only inheriting traditions from earlier migrations, but developing new ones unique to this continent. The diversity of tools reflects the diversity of environments. On floodplains, small flakes are used to cut plant fibers and butcher fish. In upland shelters, larger cores and scrapers prepare skins or dig roots. In desert edge zones, grindstones appear heavy slabs used to process seeds and tubers into more digestible forms. Each tool type fits into an ecological puzzle, a response to what foods and materials are available. Through this lens, tools are not just objects, but reflections of knowledge systems, evidence of how people understand and manipulate their surroundings. A lesser-known detail comes from the transport of stone over immense distances. Stone sourced from quarries hundreds of kilometers away is found in camps and shelters far from its origin. In the Kimberley, distinctive types of chert and quartzite are distributed across wide areas, suggesting networks of movement or exchange. In Arnhem Land, stone from distant sources shows that people travel long circuits carrying tools or raw materials with them. These journeys imply more than subsistence. They hint at connections between groups, the sharing of materials across vast ranges. The spread of stone also allows archaeologists to map pathways of dispersal, drawing lines across the continent where people once walked. Mysteries endure in this record. One unresolved question is the pace of technological change. Unlike in Eurasia, where stone industries shift rapidly, the Sahul record often shows continuity over tens of thousands of years. Flake tools of similar design appear from the earliest layers to much later ones. Does this mean that innovation was slow or that stability was valued? Were tools so well suited to their purposes that little alteration was needed? Or does the record conceal subtle changes in how tools were used and maintained, differences not easily captured in typologies? These uncertainties remind us that stone tools are silent witnesses, their meanings not always clear. At the planetary scale, the presence of ground-edge axes in Sahul offers a striking contrast with other regions. While humans in Europe are shaping blades and spear points for hunting large mammals and humans in Africa are producing microliths for composite tools, the people of Sahul are grinding axes suited for working wood in tropical forests. This divergence underscores the adaptability of Homo sapiens, showing that technologies evolve in response to local environments rather than following a single trajectory. It is a reminder that the global spread of humans is not a uniform story, but a mosaic of different pathways. The echoes of these tools are heard not only in their form, but in their use. Microscopic analysis of wear patterns reveals that some axes are used to cut hardwoods, perhaps for making shelters, digging sticks, or canoes. Flake tools show polish from cutting grasses or scraping hides. Grinding stones carry the residue of starch grains from yams and seeds, evidence of complex diets. Each mark on stone visible under a microscope is an echo of an ancient hand, a trace of work done thousands of years ago. Fire and stone also converge. Heat treatment of stone is found in some assemblages where rocks are deliberately heated to make them easier to flake. This practice reflects intimate knowledge of materials and their properties. Ochre too is ground and heat-treated, linking symbolic life with technological skill. Through such processes, people extend the possibilities of stone beyond what is given by nature. A subtle but significant detail emerges from quarries. In some regions, quarries are revisited for thousands of years, with pit scars and waste flakes accumulating across generations. These quarries become landmarks in the landscape, places of memory as well as resource. They may serve as nodes in broader networks of travel, anchoring movement across wide territories. Archaeological surveys of these quarries show the sheer scale of activity: hillsides littered with flakes, veins of stone, worked layer by layer. Such sites demonstrate the long-term importance of stone to life in Sahul. Uncertainties remain about the social dimensions of stone. Were certain tool types associated with particular groups or traditions? Did innovations like ground-edge axes spread quickly across the continent or remain localized? Some evidence suggests that axes appear early in the north, but only much later in the south. The reasons for this uneven spread are debated. Perhaps differences in environment, perhaps differences in social networks. These questions highlight how archaeology glimpses fragments of a much larger story. At a continental scale, the distribution of stone tools provides a map of expansion. Sites in Arnhem Land, Kimberley and Cape York represent the earliest footholds, but tools soon appear in central deserts along southern coasts and in Tasmania when it is still joined to the mainland. By 30,000 years ago, stone assemblages are found across every ecological zone of Sahul. The reach of these tools, scattered in dunes, caves and lake shores, mirrors the reach of people themselves. In terms of scale, the distances covered rival those of any other early human migration, stretching from tropical forests to alpine highlands. Stone tools also anchor chronology. Radiocarbon dating of charcoal is often paired with stratigraphic association of tools, giving timelines for when technologies appear and persist. In some cases, optically stimulated luminescence dating of sediments provides even deeper ages. Together, these methods weave a chronology where stone is the constant, the durable companion of human life. Unlike bones or plant remains which decay, stone endures, offering archaeologists their most reliable record. Even within continuity, change occurs. In the Holocene, after the last glacial maximum, microlithic technologies appear in some regions, small blades inserted into wooden handles to create composite tools. This later development contrasts with the earlier emphasis on large flakes and axes, showing that technological traditions evolve as environments shift. Yet the foundation remains stone as the medium through which adaptation is materialized. The echoes in stone are not only functional but cultural. Certain quarries and tool types may carry symbolic significance, though the meanings are unrecoverable. The act of grinding an axe, shaping it with patience, or selecting a particular stone type suggests values beyond utility. Stone is chosen, shaped, and carried across landscapes, linking places and people. The persistence of these practices across tens of millennia testifies to their centrality in life. In this chapter, the continent is dotted with echoes of stone. Tools chipped, ground and carried, quarries worked and revisited. Grinding slabs worn smooth by countless seeds, axes polished by use on hardwood. These artifacts are the durable record of a species adapting to new lands, innovating and maintaining traditions, shaping both environment and culture. Yet they also hold mysteries, questions of pace, spread and meaning that remain unresolved. What is certain is that in every shelter, every hearth, every vanished campstone lies at the heart of survival. Across Sahul, the echoes of these tools resound, a chorus of adaptation and continuity that stretches back 65,000 years. From the shelter of tropical rivers and coasts, humans begin to move deeper into Sahul, testing the open interiors where water is scarce and distance is immense. The shift inward is not sudden but gradual, occurring over generations as knowledge of seasonal rains, springs, and desert edge resources accumulates. Archaeological traces in Central Australia show that by at least 49,000 years ago, people are already living in the continent's arid heart. Sites such as Purit Jara Rock Shelter in the Northern Territory preserve stone tools, charcoal and ochre, marking some of the earliest known desert occupations. The presence of people so early in the continent's driest zones anchors a central fact: adaptation to aridity is part of Sahul's human story almost from the beginning. The interior landscapes are formidable. Great salt lakes lie empty for much of the year, reflecting the sun in white expanses. Sandy deserts stretch in dunes that rise and fall like waves across hundreds of kilometers. Rock outcrops, ranges and gorges punctuate the plains, offering water in hidden springs and shaded shelter. To cross such lands requires knowledge of where water lies and when plants and animals are available. Archaeology indicates that humans learn these patterns swiftly. They move not randomly, but along routes where ranges and waterholes form chains of survival. The distances are vast from Arnhem Land to central ranges, is more than 1,500 kilometers a span, greater than the stretch from Madrid to Berlin. That such journeys are undertaken within millennia of first arrival speaks to extraordinary resilience and mobility. A lesser-known detail emerges from the use of grindstones in these desert-edge sites. At Purit Jara and nearby shelters, grinding stones appear in early layers, suggesting that seeds and roots are processed even in arid conditions. The seeds of desert grasses and acacias require laborious preparation, but they offer reliable food when other resources are scarce. The presence of grinding stones in the heart of the desert underscores the importance of plant foods, often overshadowed by emphasis on hunting. Archaeobotanical residues confirm that these foods are part of subsistence from the earliest phases of desert occupation. This detail highlights how adaptation is not merely about finding water, but about transforming what the land offers into sustenance. Still, mysteries remain. How quickly did people move into the desert, and were these occupations permanent or seasonal? Some argue that desert sites represent temporary forays, with populations retreating to better watered regions in harsh times. Others suggest continuous presence supported by adaptation strategies like water storage in natural hollows and reliance on seed grinding. The question is unresolved, though the weight of evidence points to sustained occupation. Another mystery is whether population dispersals into the desert come from a single northern entry or multiple directions, perhaps including western and eastern routes. Stone tool styles suggest both continuity and local variation, leaving the pathways open to interpretation. At the planetary scale, the colonization of Sahul's deserts is remarkable. While glacial cycles reshape Europe and Asia with cold, the interior of Australia offers extremes of heat and drought. Few places on Earth present such a challenge to early human life. Yet within a short time of arrival, humans are present not only in fertile coasts, but in arid basins and dune fields. This capacity to survive across ecological extremes is part of what defines Homo sapiens globally. It is a reflection of both adaptability and mobility traits that enable expansion into every continent except Antarctica within tens of millennia. The record of fire continues here. Charcoal deposits in desert-edge sites show that burning is used even in arid zones, perhaps to stimulate growth of food plants or to aid hunting. Fire is a companion carried into the desert, a tool for reshaping sparse landscapes. The archaeological signal of fire, though thinner than in the tropics, shows continuity of practice across environments. Fire thus bridges the contrast between monsoon floodplains and arid basins, uniting Sahul's diverse ecologies under human influence. The stone tools of the desert reflect both continuity and innovation. Large flakes and scrapers remain common, but grindstones become more prominent. Some grinding stones are immense, weighing dozens of kilograms left behind when people move seasonally. Others are portable, carried along routes to be reused. The polish and wear on these stones record hours of labor, seeds ground repeatedly until the surfaces gleam. These objects are among the most tangible testimonies of desert life, enduring for tens of thousands of years after their users are gone. Water remains the central challenge. Springs, gorges and soaks are critical, and archaeological sites often cluster near them. Rock shelters above seasonal streams contain hearths and tools marking repeated visits. In some cases, stone arrangements near waterholes suggest deliberate marking of important places. Though their meanings are uncertain, such features indicate the deep significance of water sources in structuring life. Without maps or written records, knowledge of water is passed through generations, a living memory that ensures survival. Archaeologists can only glimpse fragments of this knowledge through the distribution of sites and the location of quarries. A detail sometimes overlooked is the role of ochre in desert sites. Even in arid regions, pieces of ochre are carried long distances ground and used. This persistence indicates that symbolic practices remain important regardless of environment. The effort to transport pigment across deserts suggests values that go beyond immediate survival. Ochre use connects the interior to the broader traditions of Sahul, uniting distant communities through shared symbolic materials. The mysteries of megafauna intersect with the desert record. Giant marsupials such as Diprotodon and giant kangaroos once roamed the arid plains. Their disappearance coincides with the spread of humans, but whether hunting fire or climate drives the extinctions remains debated. In the desert where environments are fragile, even small changes may have large impacts. The timing of these extinctions remains one of the unresolved questions of Sahul's prehistory. At continental scale, the crossing of interiors represents a turning point. From initial landfalls in the north, people spread across more than 4,000 kilometers, reaching coasts on every side. By 30 to 40,000 years ago, humans are present from tropical rainforests to temperate forests, from deserts to alpine zones. The occupation of Central Australia is part of this larger dispersal, demonstrating that no environment is beyond reach. The scale of this spread is immense, rivaling the settlement of Eurasia in breadth. The archaeological record captures moments of this expansion, but not the full story. Stone flakes, hearths, and ochre fragments are scattered across dunes and ranges, silent traces of lives lived in the harshest conditions. Charcoal from desert shelters, radiocarbon dated, confirms ages stretching back nearly 50,000 years. Grinding stones bear the microscopic residues of seeds long vanished from the surface. These fragments, though incomplete, testify to a human presence as enduring as the desert itself. Crossing the open interiors is thus not a single event, but a process of exploration, adaptation, and continuity. It requires knowledge of water plants, fire, and stone. It demands resilience to climate extremes and the ability to transmit survival strategies across generations. What is left to us are echoes, quarries on desert hillsides, hearths buried in dunes, and grinding stones polished by countless hands. They are the record of humanity's determination to inhabit every corner of a vast continent, even those where life is most precarious. In this chapter of Sahul's story, the open interiors stand not as barriers, but as living landscapes crossed and settled within a few thousand years of first arrival. The desert's salt lakes and ranges bear the marks of early human presence, subtle but enduring. Though mysteries remain about the pace and permanence of settlement, the fact itself is clear. By 50,000 years ago, humans walk the heart of Australia, shaping it with firestone and knowledge carried across generations. As humans establish their presence deeper into the arid heart of Sahul, rock shelters along the edges of deserts and ranges become vital havens. These natural formations, carved into sandstone escarpments and limestone cliffs, provide shade from scorching summer heat and refuge during bitter winter nights. Archaeological records from shelters such as Purit Jara Kaalpi and Allen's Cave show continuous or repeated use over tens of thousands of years, anchoring one of the clearest facts of interior settlement. Rock shelters are central nodes of survival, preserving traces of food, fire, and symbolic life in otherwise harsh landscapes. Sediment layers in these shelters act as time capsules, building up with charcoal, stone tools, ochre, and animal remains, creating an archive of human adaptation to arid Australia, stretching back nearly 50 millennia. The landscapes around these shelters are unforgiving. Beyond the cliffs and ridges lie dune fields, salt lakes, and stony deserts where surface water is scarce for much of the year. Yet within the rocks, seeps and springs offer persistent water, and shade allows respite from the intense sun. These microenvironments sustain plant growth, concentrate animal activity, and provide humans with critical resources. Archaeological evidence shows that people return season after season, leaving behind hearths layered one atop another. The ashes of thousands of fires lie compressed in meters of sediment, each marking a night of warmth, cooking, and community. A lesser-known detail comes from the preservation of plant remains within these shelters. At Purit Jara, seeds of native grasses, fragments of tubers, and residues of resin are found in occupation layers. These fragile materials rarely survive in open sites, but endure in protected cave deposits. Their presence reveals that people in the desert are not only hunting, but gathering and processing a wide range of plants, using resins as adhesives for hafting stone tools and grinding seeds into flour. This subtle evidence expands our view of desert life, showing sophisticated knowledge of botanical resources. Still, many mysteries remain. One unresolved question is whether occupation of shelters was year-round or seasonal. Some scholars suggest that people lived in these places continuously, supported by deep knowledge of water holes and plant cycles. Others argue for periodic use, with groups retreating to more fertile margins during droughts. The shelters themselves contain evidence of both patterns, long sequences of habitation, but also gaps that may represent times when conditions grew too harsh. Determining the rhythm of this occupation remains an active debate in archaeology. Another mystery concerns the symbolic role of these spaces. Many shelters contain ochre, sometimes with grinding marks or heat treatment, suggesting use for decoration or ritual. Were these shelters simply practical refuges, or did they carry spiritual or social meaning as well? The evidence is silent, leaving questions open. At the planetary scale, the human use of shelters in Sahul parallels patterns elsewhere. In Europe, caves preserve paintings of animals and records of Ice Age life. In Africa, rock shelters protect residues of pigment and tools from early symbolic traditions. Across continents, these spaces serve as both refuges and archives, places where human presence endures across millennia. In Sahul, the significance is amplified by the extremity of the surrounding desert. The shelters are not only homes, but lifelines, the points of stability in a world of scarcity. Stone tools dominate the archaeological record of these shelters. Flakes, scrapers, and cores are scattered through layers often made from materials carried from distant quarries. Some shelters contain thousands of pieces accumulated over tens of thousands of years. The continuity of tool types suggests a stable technological tradition, with grinding stones and edge-ground axes complementing flake industries. Microscopic useware studies reveal that tools are employed for cutting wood, processing plants, and butchering animals, activities that sustain life in the desert. In some cases, residues of blood fat and plant starch remain on tools, offering rare glimpses into specific tasks carried out by ancient hands. Charcoal is another constant. Fires lit in shelters not only provide warmth and cooking, but leave datable fragments that form the backbone of chronological understanding. Radiocarbon dating of charcoal at Purit Jara places human activity as early as 49,000 years ago, a timeline that confirms the rapid spread into Central Australia. These fires are more than ephemeral blazes. Their remains shape our knowledge of human antiquity in the desert. One lesser discussed but important detail is the presence of animal bones within shelter deposits. Fragments of kangaroo, wallaby, and small marsupials appear alongside burnt shells carried inland from distant rivers or lakes. These remains indicate wide-ranging diets and extensive mobility. In some cases, bones of now extinct megafauna are found, though their association with humans is debated. The shelters preserve not only tools and fires, but traces of meals, offering a direct link to daily life. Mysteries also surround the continuity of occupation through climatic extremes. During the last glacial maximum around 20,000 years ago, conditions in Australia became colder and drier, with deserts expanding and water sources shrinking. Did humans abandon the deepest deserts during this time, or did they adapt with new strategies? Some shelters show reduced occupation during this period, while others remain active, suggesting variability in response. The resilience of human groups in these environments, whether through mobility, knowledge of refugees, or reliance on plant foods, remains a subject of investigation. At continental scale, the distribution of desert shelters forms a network of nodes across central and southern Australia. From Purit Jara in the MacDonnell Ranges to Allen's Cave on the Nullarbor Plain, these sites mark points where humans anchor themselves in the arid interior. Each shelter preserves a micro-history, but together they map the broader dispersal of people across a continent of extremes. The scale of this settlement is vast, thousands of kilometers of desert crossed and inhabited long before the development of agriculture or sedentism elsewhere in the world. The symbolic dimension of shelters is suggested by ochre fragments, engravings, and occasional traces of rock art. Even in the desert, people carry pigment, grind it, and use it. At Kaalpi, in the Western Desert, ochre fragments show signs of careful preparation. While surviving art from these early times is scarce, the persistence of pigment indicates that symbolic practices endure alongside practical subsistence. The shelters are not only places of food and fire, but also places of meaning where symbolic life leaves its mark in durable stone. A planetary observation underscores the uniqueness of this adaptation. While glacial ice expands in Europe and sea levels fall worldwide, humans in Sahul learn to inhabit one of the driest inhabited continents. The contrast is striking as mammoths roam icy steppes in the north. Humans in Australia light fires in desert shelters, grind seeds from tough grasses, and travel between springs across vast dune fields. The ability of Homo sapiens to thrive in such contrasting extremes is part of what defines the species. In terms of scale, the repeated use of shelters over tens of thousands of years is extraordinary. Some deposits contain sequences more than 2 meters deep, each centimeter representing centuries of use. The fires, tools, and pigments accumulate into a continuous record that stretches across glacial cycles and environmental shifts. Few places in the world preserve such deep, unbroken testimony to human life. In this chapter, the rock shelters of the desert edge stand as enduring witnesses. They hold ashes from countless fires stone-worn by generations of grinding pigments carried across barren plains and bones of meals consumed long ago. They preserve continuity amid scarcity, resilience amid extremes. Though many mysteries remain about the rhythm of occupation, the role of symbolism, and the fate of megafauna. The fact itself is clear: humans live in Australia's deserts almost from the beginning, anchoring themselves in shelters that become both refuges and records. The echoes of these lives remain layered in stone, waiting to be read across millennia. Across Sahul, evidence of what people eat and how they prepare it survives in fragments of charcoal shell and seed. Archaeology of diet is subtle, relying on small traces buried in shelters or preserved in lake sediments. Yet these fragments reveal how early Australians adapt to changing ecologies. At Majid Bebe, Purit Jara, and other sites, microscopic residues on grinding stones show starch grains from tubers, roots, and grasses. Hearths contain charred seeds and nuts, while shell middens along coasts and rivers accumulate over generations. Together, they confirm a fact central to this story. People rely on diverse foods from the start, combining hunting, fishing, and gathering with careful preparation of plant resources. This flexibility is key to survival across environments that vary from monsoon wetlands to arid basins. Charcoal layers tell of repeated fires not only for warmth, but for cooking. Burnt bones of kangaroo, wallaby, and emu are common in shelters. In some cases, cut marks show butchering with stone tools before bones are thrown into hearths. Shell fragments. Oysters, mussels, cockles appear far inland, carried from coasts or rivers, evidence of mobility or exchange. These remains are often small and scattered, but together they build a picture of a broad diet that shifts with climate and season. Seasonal use of resources is clear waterfowl eggs in floodplains during the wet season, grass seeds in dry months, and fish when rivers run high. A lesser-known detail lies in residues of palm seeds and cycads. In tropical North Australia, these plants are toxic when raw, yet traces on grinding stones suggest that people leach or process them to make them safe. This demonstrates advanced ecological knowledge, the ability to turn difficult or dangerous plants into staple foods. Such practices endure into modern ethnographic records, but the archaeology shows they are present tens of thousands of years earlier. Another detail comes from resin and pitch found as lumps in shelters likely used for hafting stone tools. These substances also burn with bright flames, suggesting a dual role in tool-making and firelighting. Mysteries remain about diet and fire. One unresolved question is the extent to which humans contribute to the disappearance of megafauna through hunting or habitat modification. Burnt bones of giant kangaroos and other extinct animals are rarely found in direct association with human activity, making the link uncertain. Did people hunt these creatures regularly, or were they already declining due to climatic stress? Another puzzle is how food strategies differ across regions. In some areas, grinding stones appear very early, while in others they are rare until much later. Does this reflect environmental differences or cultural traditions? The answers are still debated, reminding us that the archaeological record offers glimpses but not complete narratives. At the planetary scale, Sahul's food strategies show remarkable adaptation to one of Earth's most diverse sets of environments. While glacial cycles reshape Europe and Asia, humans in Australia learn to harvest from wetlands, deserts, coasts, and forests. In each zone, diet shifts: shellfish on the coast, grass seeds in the desert, tubers in the tropics, marsupials in woodlands. This adaptability parallels patterns elsewhere, such as the use of nuts in Africa or fish in Siberia. But the breadth of environments in Sahul is unique. The global spread of Homo sapiens is marked by this capacity to diversify diet, a trait visible clearly in the Australian record. Evidence of fire as a cooking tool is ubiquitous. Hearths are found in nearly every excavated site, often containing multiple phases of burning. Some hearths are simple ash stains, while others are stone-lined pits. In a few cases, earth ovens are identified where heated stones are used to bake food underground. Such methods allow large quantities of roots or meat to be cooked evenly, a practice efficient in resource-rich but time-poor contexts. The repeated use of such methods leaves layers of cracked, fire-reddened stones in shelters visible in excavation profiles as bands of past meals. One overlooked but important detail comes from isotopic studies of human remains, such as those at Lake Mungo. Analysis of carbon and nitrogen isotopes in ancient bone suggests diets rich in freshwater resources, confirming that fish and waterfowl are central to life around lakes and rivers. These chemical traces provide direct evidence of food strategies beyond what artifacts alone can reveal. They also highlight the importance of aquatic environments, even in arid zones where lakes may exist only seasonally. Mysteries about fire remain as well. Did people use controlled burns primarily for hunting, for plant management, or for both? Charcoal sequences suggest deliberate timing, but the exact balance of motives is debated. Another question is the scale of burning. Were entire regions reshaped annually, or were fires small and localized? The truth may lie in mosaics, with patches burned at different times to create a landscape of diversity. Such questions connect food and fire in ways still being studied through pollen analysis and modern analogies with indigenous burning practices. At continental scale, food and fire together shape the environment. By burning land to encourage certain plants and animals, people effectively create managed ecosystems. Grasslands expand where forests once stood, altering habitats for marsupials and birds. Some species thrive while others decline. This human influence is detectable in pollen cores taken from lakes and swamps where shifts in vegetation align with the earliest presence of humans. The scale of this impact is vast, visible across hundreds of kilometers, marking one of the earliest large-scale transformations of landscapes by people anywhere in the world. Tools reflect these practices. Grindstones polished smooth by seeds, scrapers stained with plant resins, and flakes bearing residues of blood or fat provide direct links to tasks. Microscopic analysis of starch grains from grindstones reveals specific plants, yams, pandanus grasses. These findings show the detail of diet down to individual species in ways that change how we understand early human life. Instead of focusing solely on hunting large animals, archaeology now reveals the importance of plants, seeds, and complex preparation techniques. In shelters, the evidence of meals accumulates quietly. Layers of ash, scattered shells, cracked stones, and seed husks form deposits, meters thick. Each layer represents countless small acts of cooking and eating carried out season after season. In some places, these layers stretch back unbroken for tens of thousands of years, a continuity unmatched in most of the world. Such records show that food and fire are not episodic but constant, woven into every stage of life. Planetary context once again underscores the scale. As glaciers expand and seas fall, humans on other continents chase herds of reindeer mammoths and bison across frozen plains. In Sahul, they gather grass seeds, dig roots, fish rivers, and burn landscapes to create mosaics of productivity. These contrasting strategies illustrate the versatility of the species capable of thriving in radically different ecologies. The ability to eat almost anything with the aid of fire and stone is a key to global expansion. In this chapter, the traces of food and fire illuminate how early Australians make a living in landscapes that range from fertile floodplains to arid deserts. The evidence is fragmentary, charred seeds, ash bone pigment, but together it speaks of resilience and ingenuity. The mysteries of megafauna extinctions and fire regimes remain unresolved, but the fact of human adaptation is undeniable. By 50,000 years ago, people in Sahul are eating from every available source, shaping environments with fire and embedding knowledge of plants and animals into their traditions. What endures in the record are not full meals, but the quiet remains of countless fires, the microscopic starches of seeds, the shells carried inland, and the bones charred in hearths. These traces, preserved in shelters and sediments, form a durable memory of how humans thrive in Australia's ancient landscapes. After establishing themselves in the north and crossing into the deserts of the interior, human groups continue their slow dispersal southward, reaching into the temperate woodlands and forests that cover vast tracts of southern Sahul. These environments present new challenges and new resources. Where the tropics are governed by monsoons and the deserts by scarce waterholes, the southern forests bring cooler climates, seasonal rainfall and dense vegetation filled with unfamiliar plants and animals. Archaeological traces from sites such as Devil's Lair in southwestern Australia, Warrnambool along the southern coast, and Keilor near Melbourne confirm that by at least 45,000 years ago, humans are established in temperate zones far from their initial landfalls. The fact is clear: within 20,000 years of arriving on Sahul's shores, people occupy nearly every major ecological zone, including the cooler and wetter environments of the south. The forests are home to tall eucalypts, stringy barks, and casuarinas, creating dense canopies that limit undergrowth but sustain a rich diversity of marsupials, birds, and edible plants. Rivers and creeks cut through the forests, providing fish, freshwater mussels, and fertile flats where plant foods grow. Archaeology shows that humans adapt quickly to these resources, leaving behind shell middens, stone tools, and charcoal layers that reflect regular use. At Devil's Lair, deep deposits contain stone artifacts, hearths, and bone fragments dating back more than 45,000 years. These remains confirm one of the earliest occupations of temperate forests anywhere in the world, a record of adaptation to new climates and ecosystems. A lesser-known detail emerges from evidence of plant processing in these regions. Charred remains of tubers and nuts preserved in sediments show that forest plants are systematically gathered and cooked. In some sites, residues of yam daisies and grass tree hearts suggest deliberate harvesting practices. Ethnographic records of later Aboriginal use of these plants align with this deep history, implying continuity of knowledge across tens of millennia. In some cases, stone arrangements and digging tools indicate that people may have managed plant growth, returning to the same patches year after year. Though not farming in the later sense, this is landscape knowledge carried forward through generations. Mysteries surround the spread into southern forests. How rapidly did people move into these zones after arriving in Sahul? Some evidence suggests early dispersal, perhaps within a few thousand years of coastal landfalls, while other models argue for gradual expansion over many millennia. The uneven distribution of sites complicates the picture as preservation in forested regions is often poor. Another unresolved question is whether groups move southward in single waves or through multiple dispersals along different routes. Genetic data hints at complex population structures, but the details remain unclear. What is certain is that by 45,000 years ago, people are living deep in southern forests, adapting to environments unlike those of the north or the desert. At the planetary scale, this dispersal is striking. While humans in Europe are only beginning to enter temperate forests after emerging from open steppes, people in Sahul are already adapting to eucalyptus woodlands and cool temperate ecosystems. The spread into these forests underscores the global capacity of Homo sapiens to thrive in diverse habitats from tropical rainforests to tundra. The forests of southern Australia represent one of the farthest reaches of this adaptability, a place where humans expand to the very edges of the known continent. Stone tools in these forests reflect local adaptations. At Devil's Lair, flaked quartz and chert are common materials available in surrounding landscapes. Some tools show polish from woodworking, suggesting activities such as making spears or digging sticks. Grinding stones appear in layers dating back more than 40,000 years, indicating that seed and tuber processing continues to be vital. Ochre fragments are also present, some with grinding marks linking southern forests to the symbolic traditions seen elsewhere in Sahul. The persistence of ochre in nearly every environment highlights its enduring role in human life. Charcoal remains confirm the use of fire. In temperate forests, controlled burns create open patches that encourage grasses and attract animals such as kangaroos. Fire also reduces underbrush, making travel easier. Pollen cores from lake sediments in southern Australia show shifts in vegetation around the time of human arrival, with fire-tolerant species increasing and closed canopy forests retreating. These patterns suggest that people are using fire deliberately to shape ecosystems even in cooler, wetter climates. This continuity of fire use across environments is one of the most striking features of Sahul's human history. A small but telling detail comes from remains of freshwater mussels found in sites hundreds of kilometers from the coast. Their presence in shelters and middens indicates regular use of rivers and lakes as food sources. Isotopic studies of bone collagen from ancient human remains in southern regions support this, showing significant reliance on aquatic resources. This evidence reveals that adaptation to forests is not limited to hunting and gathering on land, but extends to freshwater systems, weaving rivers and lakes into subsistence strategies. Mysteries also touch on the role of megafauna in these forests. Large animals such as giant kangaroos and marsupial lions once roamed southern Australia. Their disappearance coincides with human expansion, but direct evidence of hunting is sparse. Did people actively hunt these animals, or did habitat modification through fire contribute to their decline? The lack of definitive kill sites leaves the question open. The forest record remains silent on whether megafauna vanish through human action, climate change, or both. The scale of dispersal into southern forests is immense. From initial landfalls in the north to the caves of Tasmania is a distance of more than 4,000 kilometers, a journey equivalent to crossing much of Eurasia. Within this space, humans adapt to ecosystems ranging from deserts to alpine zones, with the temperate forests forming one of the most resource-rich but demanding environments. The persistence of occupation at sites like Devil's Lair, with sequences stretching across tens of millennia, shows that these forests are not merely passed through but inhabited continuously. Symbolic practices endure here as well. Ochre carried into caves, engravings on rock surfaces, and pigment residues on stone hint at cultural life beyond subsistence. While large-scale rock art panels of later periods are absent from these earliest sites, the evidence suggests continuity of symbolic expression. The effort to carry ochre into forests, sometimes from distant sources, highlights its value across all environments. At planetary scale, once more, the southern forests of Sahul represent a unique human frontier. As ice sheets lock water in the north, dropping sea levels worldwide, people in Australia adapt to cool woodlands far from any other population centre. These communities are effectively isolated, separated by thousands of kilometers of sea from other parts of the world. Yet their archaeological record shows resilience, continuity, and symbolic life equal to any elsewhere. The layers of southern shelters tell a quiet story. Hearths of ash and charcoal mark meals eaten in flickering firelight. Grinding stones bear the polish of seeds and tubers. Bones of wallabies and possums are charred shells of mussels cracked. Ochre fragments lie ground and discarded, testimony to practices whose meanings we cannot fully know. Through these traces, the lives of people in the southern forests endure across tens of thousands of years. In this chapter, the meeting of humans with temperate woodlands reveals the breadth of adaptation. From deserts to forests, from salt lakes to rivers, the people of Sahul adjust, persist, and transform their environments with firestone and knowledge passed through generations. The forests stand as both challenge and refuge, places of abundance, shaped by deliberate burning and skilled gathering. Though mysteries remain about timing routes and the fate of megafauna, the fact of human presence in these southern forests is undeniable. Their echoes remain in caves and shelters in ash and stone, a record of resilience across millennia. Across southern Sahul, where rivers once widened into vast lakes, humans established settlements that would endure for tens of thousands of years. Many of these lakes no longer exist as they once did. Today, they are dry basins or shallow depressions, their former shorelines marked by lunettes of sand and clay. But in the deep past, they held expansive waters, drawing both animals and people to their margins. Archaeological evidence from Lake Mungo, Lake Victoria, and other basins of the Willandra Lakes system shows that humans were present here by at least 45,000 years ago. These sites preserve hearths, tools, shells, and bones, but also something rarer, burials among the earliest anywhere in the world. The fact is, unambiguous, humans in Sahul not only lived along these lakes but performed rituals of burial that anchor some of the oldest evidence of symbolic care for the dead outside Africa. The lakes themselves were dynamic systems. Fed by rivers that shifted with climate, they expanded during wet phases and contracted or dried entirely during droughts. Shorelines advanced and retreated across centuries, leaving layers of sediments that capture pollen, charcoal, and shells. People responded to these rhythms by moving with the water's edge, establishing camps where fish, waterfowl, and plants were abundant. Shell middens and fish bones appear in excavation layers, confirming that aquatic resources were central to life around these lakes. The abundance of food made these places focal points for settlement gatherings and ritual. A lesser-known detail lies in the discovery of footprints preserved in clay near Lake Mungo. These prints, more than 20,000 years old, record the movements of adults and children across wet ground. Some prints suggest running, others walking in groups. Their preservation is rare, offering a glimpse into fleeting moments of human activity. Unlike stone tools or bones, footprints capture the immediacy of presence, the passing of individuals whose names are long forgotten. They are fragile echoes of a human past, preserved by chance in the sediments of a vanished lake. Mysteries surround these ancient lakes. One unresolved question is the permanence of settlement. Did people live year-round along the shorelines, or did they come seasonally during periods of abundance? The archaeological record shows continuity over tens of millennia, but gaps in occupation layers may represent times of drought when the lakes dried. Another mystery is the purpose and meaning of burials found here. At Lake Mungo, one individual is cremated, the earliest known instance of this practice anywhere, while another is carefully buried with ochre sprinkled over the body. These acts reveal symbolic traditions, but their full meanings remain unknown. Were they expressions of identity, community, or spiritual belief? The evidence speaks of care and ritual but leaves questions unanswered. At the planetary scale, the settlement of lakes in Sahul mirrors human reliance on freshwater systems worldwide. In Africa, lakes and rivers anchor some of the earliest human sites. In Eurasia, Ice Age hunters cluster around river valleys where resources concentrate. In Sahul, lakes serve the same role, offering abundance in otherwise arid landscapes. Yet, the scale here is unique. The Willandra Lakes once stretched across hundreds of kilometers, their interconnected basins forming a system as large as small nations. For humans spreading through the southern continent, these lakes are magnets of life, drawing them into the heart of the arid zone. The archaeological record of Lake Mungo is among the most detailed in Sahul. Hearths constructed from clay balls, stone tools fashioned from silkreat, and fish bones charred in cooking fires all testify to daily life. Seeds and plant remains confirm the gathering of terrestrial foods as well, including grasses and tubers. The combination of aquatic and terrestrial resources reflects the flexibility that defines human survival here. Grinding stones found on dunes suggest processing of seeds, while bone fragments show butchering of kangaroos and emus. This mixed economy sustains populations through changing climates. The burials at Lake Mungo remain some of the most significant discoveries in world prehistory. Mungo lady cremated and reburied represents the earliest known cremation dating back over 40,000 years. Mungo man, interred with ochre, demonstrates symbolic ritual of equal antiquity. These acts reveal not only a concern for the dead, but also traditions of meaning and memory. The ochre sourced from distant locations implies that symbolic practices connect landscapes across vast distances. The presence of such burials so early in Sahul underscores the depth of cultural life that accompanies subsistence. Another detail often overlooked comes from lunette sediments that preserve records of vegetation change. Pollen analysis shows shifts from wetter adapted plants to more arid tolerant species as climates fluctuate. These changes align with human presence marked by charcoal layers that suggest deliberate burning around lake margins. Fire here is used to manage grasslands and attract animals just as in other regions. The combination of lake resources and fire-managed environments creates productive mosaics that sustain human groups over millennia. Mysteries extend to the disappearance of the lakes themselves. By about 15,000 years ago, most of the Willandra system had dried, leaving only intermittent wetlands. Did people abandon the region entirely, or did they adapt by focusing on rivers and smaller waterholes? Archaeological evidence shows reduced occupation, but not a complete absence, suggesting that knowledge of the landscape allowed continued survival even as waters receded. The fading of these Great Lakes represents both an environmental shift and a turning point in human settlement patterns. At a continental scale, the Willandra Lakes connect Sahul's story to global climate change. During glacial periods, rivers feeding the lakes weakened as rainfall patterns shifted, while interglacial phases brought renewed flows. These rhythms are part of the larger planetary system of ice sheets, ocean currents, and atmospheric circulation. The lives of people on Sahul's lake shores are thus linked to changes in far distant places, melting ice in the north, shifts in monsoon belts, and cycles of global temperature. Their fires, tools, and burials are local expressions of planetary processes. The scale of human presence at these lakes is profound. Middens stretch for kilometers along ancient shorelines containing millions of shells and bones. Hearths cluster in dense patches suggesting large gatherings. The footprints, burials, and tools all speak of communities that return repeatedly generation after generation. In terms of time, these sites are occupied for more than 20,000 years, longer than many civilizations elsewhere in the world. The continuity is staggering, a reminder of the depth of human history in Sahul. Symbolic life is inseparable from these places. The burials are the clearest evidence, but ochre fragments, worked shells, and possible engravings on bone add to the picture. The act of cremation at Lake Mungo implies complex beliefs about death and transformation, while the careful burial with ochre suggests reverence and ritual. These practices align with symbolic traditions worldwide, placing Sahul within the broader human story of meaning and memory. In this chapter, the ancient lakes of Sahul stand as both landscapes of abundance and archives of human presence. They preserve traces of meals, fires, and rituals layered across millennia of shifting water and climate. The burials at Lake Mungo remain touchstones of human history, among the earliest expressions of symbolic care for the dead. The footprints in clay remind us of individuals moving across wet ground, their lives fleeting but preserved in sediment. The lakes themselves, once vast and now dry, frame the scale of human adaptation to change. Though many mysteries endure the permanence of settlement, the meaning of burials, the causes of megafauna decline, the fact remains, life beside these lakes endures for tens of thousands of years, shaping one of the richest chapters in Sahul's deep past. When humans arrive in Sahul, they share the continent with an extraordinary array of giant animals. These megafauna include Diprotodon, a marsupial the size of a rhinoceros, Zygomaturus, a giant wombat-like browser, Procoptodon, a short-faced kangaroo taller than a human, and Genyornis, a huge flightless bird. Giant reptiles also roam the landscape, among them the formidable Megalania, a goanna estimated at over 5 meters long. Rivers and wetlands hold crocodiles larger than any alive today, while marsupial lions, Thylacoleo with powerful jaws and retractable claws, hunt across woodlands. The fact of their existence is recorded in fossil deposits across the continent, many dated to within the time frame of human arrival. Yet by about 40,000 years ago, nearly all of these species vanish. The question of why remains one of the most debated mysteries of Sahul's prehistory. Fossil layers show that these animals survive multiple glacial cycles before humans appear, suggesting resilience to climate fluctuations. Their disappearance coincides with the period after human settlement, raising the possibility of human involvement. Burnt eggshells of Genyornis found in dunes across Australia and dated to more than 40,000 years ago provide direct evidence that humans eat the eggs of giant birds. Similarly cut marks on bones of some large marsupials hint at butchering. These findings support the idea that human hunting contributes to the decline of megafauna, at least in part. A lesser-known detail lies in residues of burning on eggshells. Studies of microscopic changes in protein structure confirm that the eggs of Genyornis are cooked over fire, the earliest clear evidence of humans exploiting these animals. In some dune fields, thousands of fragments scatter across surfaces, suggesting repeated collection of eggs from nests. While a single human group cannot wipe out a species by eating eggs, sustained pressure over generations could prevent populations from recovering. This subtle evidence shows how small actions accumulate into large ecological consequences. Mysteries remain about the role of climate. Around the time of megafauna extinctions, Australia becomes drier with reduced rainfall and shrinking lakes. Some argue that these environmental stresses push large animals to the brink, with humans only a minor factor. Others argue that climate alone cannot explain the sudden and widespread timing of extinctions which occur within a few thousand years of human arrival. The debate continues, with new evidence from dating techniques, isotopes, and fossil surveys offering pieces but not yet a complete picture. Was it overhunting, burning of habitats, climate stress, or a combination of all three? The answer remains elusive. At the planetary scale, Sahul's extinctions fit into a wider pattern. On every continent except Africa, where humans evolve alongside large animals, the arrival of Homo sapiens coincides with the disappearance of megafauna. In North America, mammoths, mastodons, and giant ground sloths vanish after humans arrive. In Eurasia, woolly rhinoceroses and cave lions decline in the same time frame. Sahul's record aligns with this pattern, suggesting that the spread of humans brings pressures unfamiliar to animals that evolved without them. The scale is global, a recurring theme in the expansion of the species. The archaeological record of Sahul provides indirect glimpses of human interaction with megafauna. Large bones are sometimes found in association with stone tools, though rarely with clear evidence of hunting. More often, the evidence is circumstantial extinction timelines overlapping with human arrival, changes in vegetation linked to fire, and scattered traces of butchery. In the case of Thylacoleo, no direct kill sites exist, but its absence after 40,000 years suggests either habitat change or human impact. The silence of the record is itself a puzzle. Why so little evidence of hunting if humans are involved? One possibility is that encounters are rare, another that preservation conditions obscure the evidence. Another lesser discussed but intriguing clue comes from isotopic studies of megafauna teeth. Chemical signatures reveal shifts in diet during the late Pleistocene, suggesting that vegetation changes force animals to alter feeding strategies. These shifts may reduce resilience, making populations more vulnerable to additional pressures. In this view, human burning of landscapes plays a role not by direct hunting, but by transforming habitats, tipping the balance against species already stressed by climate. Mysteries extend to the speed of extinction. Some models suggest rapid collapse within a few centuries of human arrival, while others argue for a slower decline over millennia. Precise dating of fossil sites remains challenging, with uncertainties of several thousand years. This makes it difficult to resolve the sequence of events. Did humans spread across the continent, encountering megafauna only briefly before they vanish, or did they coexist for thousands of years in some regions? The answer may differ by species and location, adding complexity to the picture. At continental scale, the disappearance of megafauna reshapes ecosystems. Without Diprotodon and other large grazers, vegetation patterns change, fire regimes shift, and smaller animals occupy niches once held by giants. The absence of top predators, such as Thylacoleo, alters food webs, perhaps allowing medium-sized species to flourish. Humans adapt to these changes, but the continent is permanently transformed. The extinction of megafauna is not only a biological event, but an ecological turning point. The scale of these losses is immense. More than 80% of Australia's large-bodied species disappear, a higher proportion than in many other continents. This reshaping of fauna occurs at the same time that humans are establishing enduring settlements in deserts, forests, and coasts. The timing suggests that human presence, whether through hunting, fire, or indirect impacts, plays at least some role. Yet the balance between human agency and climate remains one of the unresolved questions of global prehistory. Symbolic echoes of megafauna may persist in oral traditions. Some Aboriginal stories describe giant creatures, monstrous birds or fearsome reptiles that echo the forms of extinct animals. While these accounts are recorded much later, some researchers suggest they may preserve distant memories of encounters with megafauna. If so, cultural memory extends across tens of millennia, linking myth with prehistory. This possibility remains speculative but adds depth to the story of human-megafauna coexistence. The fossil record also captures unusual details. At Cuddy Springs in New South Wales, megafauna bones and stone tools are found together in sediments dated to around 30,000 years ago. The association is debated, with some arguing that the materials are mixed from different layers. If genuine, it would suggest longer survival of megafauna than elsewhere, hinting at regional variation in extinction timing. Such uncertainties illustrate the complexity of reconstructing events so deep in time. In this chapter of Sahul's story, the question of megafauna remains open. The facts are clear. Giant animals once roamed the continent. They disappear within a few thousand years of human arrival, and their loss transforms ecosystems. The details of why, however, are unresolved. Hunting, egg collection, habitat burning, and climate shifts all leave traces in the record, but none provides a complete explanation. What endures is the scale of change. A continent of giants becomes a land of smaller marsupials and birds, shaping the ecology that persists into the present. The disappearance of Sahul's megafauna is both a local and a global story. It links the expansion of humans to patterns of extinction on other continents, revealing the profound ecological consequences of migration. It raises questions that remain unanswered, even with modern science reminding us of the limits of evidence. Yet it also underscores the resilience of human populations who thrive through these changes, adapting diets, tools, and practices to a world in transformation. The giants vanish, but humans remain, carrying forward knowledge, fire, and symbolic life across the altered landscapes of Sahul. Across Sahul, from Arnhem Land to the Kimberley, from the Pilbara to Cape York, rock surfaces bear traces of human expression that stretch back tens of thousands of years. Pigments ground from ochre hematite and charcoal stain cave walls and boulders. Engravings etched into stone record shapes, lines and figures. These marks are among the earliest surviving evidence of symbolic life in Australia, and they continue unbroken into the present, linking the first people of the continent with their descendants today. The fact is clear: symbolic practices expressed through art and pigment are present from the earliest phases of human settlement in Sahul, making them some of the oldest continuous traditions of symbolic expression in the world. Ochre fragments are ubiquitous in archaeological sites. At Madjed Baby, pieces of ochre appear in layers dating back at least 65,000 years, many with grinding marks that show they were prepared for use. In Purit Jara, deep in the desert, ochre is carried long distances and ground into powder. At Lake Mungo, ochre is sprinkled over the burial of Mungo Man more than 40,000 years ago, marking one of the earliest known symbolic burials. These facts anchor the story. Ochre is not an incidental material, but a central element of life associated with both daily and ritual activities. A lesser-known detail comes from quarries where ochre was mined. In Wilgie in Western Australia, one of the largest known ancient ochre mines, tunnels and pits show extraction of pigment on a massive scale. The site was worked for thousands of years. Its ochre traded across vast distances. Microscopic analysis reveals careful selection of ochre types with particular colors and textures valued more than others. This detail shows that ochre was not only used widely, but sought after in specific forms, suggesting preferences and meanings that extend beyond the practical. The mysteries of rock art and ochre use remain profound. When do the earliest surviving paintings actually date from? Direct dating of pigment is difficult, and many panels are younger than the earliest occupation layers that contain ochre fragments. Some engravings and paintings in Arnhem Land and the Kimberley may date